Alex had never paid much attention to the scarecrow before. It was just one of those things that had always been there, like the rusted mailbox at the end of the drive or the weather-beaten barn that stood, slouched and sagging, in the middle of the field. It wore a plaid shirt, faded by too many summers, and a floppy hat that barely clung to its head. Straw poked out from the sleeves and collar like the arms of a starved, skeletal man. To Alex, it had been nothing more than a relic of the past, a half-forgotten ghost from the days when people still believed a stuffed dummy could keep the crows away. But lately, something had changed. The first time Alex noticed, it was just a fleeting thought. They were looking out the kitchen window, a mug of lukewarm coffee in hand, when their eyes slid past the barn and over the fields. The scarecrow stood where it always had, right in the middle, arms outstretched in its eternal crucifixion. Alex frowned, but the thought was gone before they could grasp it. The coffee was too strong, the day too early, and the memory of last night's restless sleep lingered like a bad taste in their mouth. The next day, though, the thought came back, and this time it stuck. Alex was taking out the trash, the bag swinging heavy in their hand, when they saw it. The scarecrow wasn't in the middle of the field anymore. It had moved, just a little, but enough to notice. Now it was closer to the barn, standing in the same pose, but off-center. Alex stopped, the trash bag hitting the ground with a dull thud, and stared. The air felt heavy, as if charged with electricity. A faint feeling of being watched tickled at the back of their neck. "Must be the wind," Alex muttered to themselves, shaking their head as if to dislodge the unsettling thought. Or maybe the ground's uneven. But even as they said it, the words felt hollow, like a lie told to soothe a frightened child. Alex picked up the trash bag and hurried back inside, closing the door a little too hard behind them. Over the next few days, the feeling grew. It was the same every morning. Alex would look out the window, and the scarecrow would be in a different spot. Sometimes it was only a few feet to the left or right. Other times it seemed to have moved closer, inching its way towards the house like a game of red light, green light played in slow motion. Each time, Alex's unease grew, a knot of discomfort twisting tighter and tighter in their gut. It was on the 5th day that Alex finally decided to investigate. The scarecrow had moved again, this time standing so close to the barn it seemed to be leaning against it. Alex could see it clearly from the kitchen window, the morning sun casting long shadows that made the scarecrow look taller, darker. They finished their coffee in one gulp, set the mug down with a clink, and marched outside, their footsteps crunching in the gravel. Up close, the scarecrow looked more pathetic than threatening. Its clothes were ragged, hanging off it in tatters. The hat had slipped, revealing a face made of burlap, with a crude, stitched smile that seemed almost apologetic. Yet as Alex stood there, staring into those blank button eyes, a chill ran down their spine. The air around the scarecrow was still, too still, as if the world held its breath. Alex felt a strange urge to reach out, to touch the rough fabric, to make sure it was real. Instead, they took a step back, shaking their head. "It's just a scarecrow," they said aloud, their voice sounding small in the empty field. "Nothing to be afraid of." But even as they turned and walked away, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something old and patient, something that didn't need to breathe. Back in the house, Alex closed the curtains and tried to go about their day. But the image of the scarecrow lingered, a shadow at the edge of their mind. There was something off about it, something that gnawed at the edges of their thoughts, an itch of discomfort they couldn't quite scratch. And that night, when Alex finally went to bed, they dreamed of button eyes and stitched smiles and the faint rustling of straw in the dark. Alex couldn't stop thinking about the scarecrow. The whole thing was ridiculous, and they knew it. Scarecrows don't just move on their own. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe kids from the nearby town were playing a prank, sneaking into the field at night and moving it around for kicks. That made sense. It was the kind of dumb thing Alex might have done at their age. Hadn't they once spent a whole summer ding-dong ditching the neighbors down the street? Yeah, it had to be kids. But even with a perfectly reasonable explanation in mind, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like an itch buried deep in their mind, that no amount of scratching could reach. The scarecrow was there every time they looked out the window, always in a different spot, always standing with its arms stretched out as if waiting for something. It was the stillness that got to them, the way it seemed to stand so perfectly, unnaturally still. The air around it was too quiet, as if the birds and insects were giving it a wide berth. Finally, Alex couldn't take it anymore. Curiosity gnawed at them, and the only way to stop it was to go out and take a closer look. They pulled on a pair of boots, grabbed a flashlight even though it was midday, and set out toward the field. As they walked, a gust of wind blew through, rustling the tall grass and carrying with it the faint, musty smell of hay and earth. The scarecrow stood waiting for them, its silent vigil unbroken. Up close, it looked even more pathetic than before. Its plaid shirt hung from its frame like loose skin, the fabric faded to a sickly shade of gray. Straw poked out of the sleeves and collar, brittle and yellowed. The hat was slumped forward, casting a shadow over the burlap face. It was a sad, sorry thing, really something that belonged in an old black and white photo. Not here, not here, not now. Alex circled it slowly, studying every inch. They kicked at the dirt around its base, looking for footprints, for any sign that someone had been here recently. Nothing. The ground was undisturbed, the soil hard and unyielding. They peered up at the scarecrow's face, and a shiver ran down their spine. Those button eyes, black, shiny, seemed to follow them, as if the scarecrow were watching, waiting. "Okay, let's see what you're made of," Alex muttered, more to themselves than to the scarecrow. They reached out and grabbed the hem of the shirt, tugging it up to reveal the straw stuffing beneath. Nothing unusual there. Just a bunch of dried, crumbling straw packed into a frame of rough, splintered wood. Alex let the shirt fall back into place, wiped their hands on their jeans, and took a step back. There was nothing here. Just an old scarecrow, doing its job, standing in the middle of a field. So why did Alex feel like they were missing something? Like there was a secret, hidden just out of sight, waiting to be uncovered. As they stood there, staring at the scarecrow, the wind picked up again, and the air felt heavy, pressing down on their shoulders. Alex felt their heartbeat quicken, a flicker of unease sparking in their chest. The scarecrow's head tilted slightly, the hat shifting with the movement. It was the wind, had to be. And yet Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the scarecrow was looking at them, those button eyes glinting with something more than reflection. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the field. Alex took a deep breath and turned away, heading back toward the house. But the itch in their mind hadn't gone away. If anything, it had grown stronger, more insistent. The scarecrow might be nothing more than wood and straw, but there was something about it, something that felt off. It was an unsettling stillness, a quiet that was too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Back inside, Alex closed the door and locked it, the sound of the bolts sliding into place oddly reassuring. They stood by the window, peering out at the field, at the scarecrow standing near the barn. It hadn't moved, but then they hadn't expected it to. Not while they were watching. No, the scarecrow would wait until they weren't looking, until their guard was down. That's when it would move, that's when it would. Alex shook their head, laughing softly. They were being ridiculous, letting their imagination run wild. It was just a scarecrow, a bit of old farm equipment, nothing more. But even as they told themselves that, the unease lingered, a whisper at the back of their mind. That night, as Alex lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, they couldn't stop thinking about the scarecrow. They couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, those dark, shining eyes that seemed to watch them, to know them. And as sleep finally took them, they dreamed of fields stretching out endlessly, and a figure in the distance, slowly, so slowly, making its way closer. It was the kind of morning that Alex used to love. The sun had just crept over the horizon, spilling golden light across the fields, making everything glow. The air was crisp and cool, the kind that made you feel alive, made you breathe deep and smile at the simple joy of another day. But this morning Alex's smile faded as soon as they looked out the kitchen window. The scarecrow had moved again. Not just a little this time. No, it had moved a lot. It was standing right next to the old well, much closer to the house. Alex's stomach tightened, a ball of unease twisting into a knot. The scarecrow's head was turned slightly, as if looking toward the house, toward the window, toward Alex. They set their coffee down, the mug clinking against the counter, and stepped closer to the window. The glass was cold under their fingers as they leaned against the pane, staring out at the field. The scarecrow hadn't moved again, but that didn't make it any better. It was too close, far too close. Alex could see every detail now, the tattered plaid shirt, the faded denim overalls, the brim of the hat casting a shadow over the burlap face. But it was the eyes that held Alex's gaze, those dark, shiny button eyes that seemed almost alive. A shiver ran down Alex's spine, a cold prickle of fear that made their skin crawl. They felt exposed, vulnerable, like a bug pinned under glass. Alex pulled away from the window, rubbing their arms to chase away the chill. It was stupid, this fear. Scarecrows don't move on their own. Someone had to be doing this. Some prank, some sick joke, meant to scare them. Well, it was working. I'm not going to just sit here and take this, Alex muttered to themselves, anger bubbling up to chase away the fear. They grabbed their jacket, yanked it on, and stomped toward the door. Outside, the morning air bit at their skin, but Alex hardly felt it. Their eyes were locked on the scarecrow, their feet moving of their own accord. They marched across the yard, the grass crunching under their boots, the wind whipping at their hair. The closer Alex got, the more their anger faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The scarecrow loomed larger with each step, its presence filling the field, dominating the landscape. Alex slowed, their feet dragging, as they reached the edge of the well. They stopped, staring up at the scarecrow. It stood there, silent, still, its button eyes glinting in the sunlight. "What do you want?" Alex demanded, their voice sounding small and hollow in the open air. They hadn't meant to speak, but the words tumbled out, driven by a need to break the silence, to shatter the oppressive stillness. The scarecrow didn't respond, of course, but Alex could have sworn those eyes darkened, just for a moment. They felt a presence, a weight pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. Alex reached out a hand, their fingers trembling, and touched the scarecrow's arm. The fabric was rough under their fingertips, the straw inside prickly and dry. For a moment nothing happened. Then, a sound, a faint, rustling noise, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Alex snatched their hand back, heart pounding. The scarecrow's head tilted, just a fraction, and Alex felt a chill wash over them, a cold wave that left them shivering. The air around them seemed to hum, a low, thrumming vibration that thrummed through Alex's bones. Alex stumbled back, nearly tripping over their own feet, their eyes never leaving the scarecrow. The rustling grew louder, a whispering sound that filled the air, wrapping around Alex like a shroud. They spun around, eyes scanning the field, but there was nothing, no one. Just the wind, picking up and making the grass sway, making the old barn creak. But the sound, Alex was sure the sound wasn't just the wind. It was too deliberate, too directed. It felt like something was watching them. Panic clawed at Alex's throat, and they turned and ran, their feet pounding the earth, their breath coming in gasps. They didn't stop until they were back inside, the door slamming shut behind them. Alex leaned against it, panting, their heart thudding in their chest. The house was quiet, too quiet, the silence pressing down on them like a weight. Alex pressed a hand to their forehead, trying to steady their breathing, trying to think. What had just happened? They couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words. But they knew, deep down, that something was wrong. terribly, horribly wrong. And the scarecrow, no, whatever was in the field, that thing knew it too. As Alex stood there, trying to catch their breath, they heard it again, a faint rustling, like straw brushing against wood. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver through Alex's body, a cold dread that settled in their bones. They turned toward the window, their hand reaching out to pull back the curtain, to look. But they stopped, their hand hovering in midair. They didn't want to look, didn't want to see. The scarecrow's image was burned into their mind, those dark eyes, that twisted smile. It was too close now, too real. Alex backed away from the window, their heart pounding, their mind racing. The scarecrow had moved. It had moved, and it wasn't done yet. Alex lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. It felt like it never would again. The house was dark, silent, the only sound the occasional creak of wood settling, the ticking of the old clock in the hall. Alex had thought about leaving the lights on, but that would have felt like admitting something was wrong, like inviting the darkness to notice them. So they lay there, wrapped in blankets, their heart a drumbeat in their chest, counting the seconds as they passed. They tried to think about anything but the scarecrow, but it was impossible. Every time Alex closed their eyes, they saw it standing in the field, its button eyes gleaming in the sun, its body tilted just so, like it was listening, like it was waiting. They could still hear the rustling sound, the whisper of straw against straw, echoing in their ears. The sound had followed them into the house, stayed with them through dinner, through the long hours of night. Now it was all they could hear, drowning out even the sound of their own breathing. Alex's eyes drifted shut, heavy with exhaustion, and they slipped into sleep without realizing it. The dreams came immediately, sharp and vivid, more real than the world outside. Alex stood in the field, the grass brushing against their legs, the sky a dull, gray haze above them. The air was thick, hard to breathe, and the only sound was that same rustling, a whisper that filled the air, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The scarecrow was there, standing in the middle of the field, its arms outstretched, its head cocked to one side. Its face was different now, the stitched smile wider, more pronounced, the button eyes dark and gleaming. Alex tried to move, but their feet wouldn't obey, rooted to the ground like the scarecrow itself. The rustling grew louder, a hiss that filled Alex's ears, drowning out everything else. "You can't stop it," a voice whispered, soft and cold. "You can't stop what's coming." Alex turned, looking for the source of the voice, but there was nothing, no one. Just the field, stretching out endlessly, the grass swaying in the wind. They tried to speak, to call out, but their voice caught in their throat, a strangled gasp that made no sound. The scarecrow's head tilted further, and its eyes seemed to glint, as if it was laughing. In the dream, Alex felt a hand on their shoulder, cold and heavy. They spun around, but no one was there. The field was empty, the wind whistling through the grass. Alex felt a chill run down their spine, a cold breath on the back of their neck. They turned back to the scarecrow, and it was closer now, its eyes staring into theirs, unblinking, unfeeling. "You can't stop it," the voice whispered again. Closer this time, a breath against Alex's ear. "It's too late." The scarecrow's arms moved, slowly, stiffly, its fingers curling, the straw crackling. It took a step forward, and then another, its movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. Alex tried to move, to run, but their feet were glued to the ground, their body frozen. The scarecrow was coming closer. Its face twisted into a smile, the button eyes shining with something dark, something ancient. The rustling sound was deafening now, a roar that filled the world, the air alive with it. Alex opened their mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The scarecrow was almost on top of them, its fingers reaching out, cold and rough, brushing against Alex's skin. The touch sent a jolt of fear through them. a shock that burned through their veins. And then they were awake, sitting up in bed, their heart pounding, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The room was dark, the only light a sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtains. Alex's skin was cold, clammy, their hands shaking. The dream lingered sharp and clear, the rustling sound still echoing in their ears. They reached for the lamp on the bedside table, their fingers fumbling with the switch. Light flooded the room, bright and blinding, and Alex blinked, their eyes adjusting. The room was empty, the door closed, the shadows held at bay by the circle of light. But the fear was still there, a knot in their stomach, a tightness in their chest. Alex swung their legs over the side of the bed, their feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. They needed a drink, something to calm their nerves, to chase away the lingering remnants of the dream. The floor was cold under their feet as they made their way to the kitchen, the house silent around them. The glass of water was cool, refreshing, the taste of it grounding Alex in reality. They set the glass down on the counter, their eyes drawn to the window. The curtains were closed, but Alex felt a pull, a need to look, to see. Their hand reached out, fingers trembling, and they pulled the curtain back, just a little. The field was dark, the moonlight casting long shadows across the grass. The scarecrow stood in the middle of the field, exactly where it had been before, its arms outstretched, its head tilted. But even in the darkness, Alex could see the gleam of its eyes, staring back at them, unblinking, unmoving, watching. Alex let the curtain fall, their heart thudding in their chest. They turned away from the window. The image of the scarecrow burned into their mind, those button eyes gleaming in the dark. The fear was still there, a whisper in the back of their mind, a chill that wouldn't leave. The dreams were just beginning. The days stretched out, one bleeding into the next, and the world around Alex seemed to close in, tightening like a noose. They hadn't slept well, not in days, maybe weeks. The dreams were always there, waiting just on the edge of sleep. And each time Alex closed their eyes, they could feel the scarecrow's presence, cold and patient, just beyond the reach of waking. It was worse at night, of course. The darkness brought with it the whispering sounds, the soft rustling that Alex couldn't block out, no matter how hard they tried. It was in the quiet moments that Alex felt it most, that strange, creeping sense of unease. It slithered into their thoughts, coiled around their mind, making it hard to think, to focus. The scarecrow was in the field, yes, but it was also here, in the house, in the walls. Alex could feel it. A presence lurking just beyond sight, a shadow that never quite left. The first time it happened, Alex was in the kitchen, fixing breakfast. The sun was bright, the morning air cool, and for a moment, Alex had almost felt normal, almost forgotten the gnawing fear that had taken root inside them. They reached for the carton of eggs on the counter, and that's when they saw it, a thin line of mud, smeared across the floor, leading from the back door to the kitchen table. Alex froze, the egg carton slipping from their fingers, hitting the floor with a splat. Mud. Dark, wet, smeared across the clean tiles in a trail of brown footprints. Alex's mind reeled, the rational part of their brain struggling to catch up. How had the mud gotten in? They hadn't been outside that morning, hadn't set foot in the field. And yet there it was, plain as day. A chill settled over Alex, a creeping cold that seeped into their bones. They crouched down, hesitating for a moment before reaching out to touch the mud. It was still wet, sticky, clinging to their fingers. The smell of earth filled their nose, sharp and tangy. Alex stood up, wiping their hand on a towel, their eyes following the trail of footprints. It led from the door, across the kitchen, and stopped abruptly at the table, as if whoever or whatever had left them had simply vanished into thin air. Alex checked the door, but it was locked, bolted from the inside. No windows were open, no signs of forced entry. The mud shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there. And yet there it was, staring up at Alex, a reminder of the impossible. The next few days brought more of the same. Small things at first. The back door standing ajar when Alex was sure they had closed it. A chair moved slightly out of place. A glass knocked over, water pooling on the floor. Each time Alex's unease grew, the knot in their stomach tightening, a low, simmering dread bubbling beneath the surface. It was as if the house itself were conspiring against them, the walls shifting, closing in, pressing down. One morning Alex came down to find the front door wide open, the wind howling through the gap, papers fluttering from the table, scattered across the floor. They stood in the doorway, heart pounding, eyes darting from shadow to shadow to shadow, expecting to see something. But there was nothing. Just the empty yard, the field stretching out beyond, the scarecrow a dark silhouette against the sky. Alex slammed the door shut, bolting it, their hands trembling. The house was too quiet, the silence oppressive, a weight that hung in the air. They could hear their own breathing, loud and harsh, the only sound in the stillness. They turned, leaning against the door, their eyes sweeping the room. Everything looked normal, as it always did. But Alex knew better. They could feel it, a presence, something watching, waiting. It wasn't just the house. The field, too, seemed different, the grass taller, thicker, the air heavy, charged with something unseen. The barn door, which had hung open for years, now creaked closed on its own, the hinges groaning. The shadows inside the barn seemed deeper, darker, as if hiding something. The scarecrow was still there, always there, but now it felt more aware. As if it knew Alex was watching, and it was watching back. One night, Alex awoke to the sound of scratching, a faint, persistent noise, like nails on wood. They lay in bed, heart racing, ears straining to catch the sound. There it was again, coming from the direction of the window. Alex turned their heads slowly, the darkness pressing in around them. The window was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze, the sound louder now, closer. Alex sat up, every muscle tense, the air cold against their skin. They reached for the lamp, their fingers brushing against the switch, but they hesitated. The scratching sound stopped, replaced by a soft, rustling noise, the same sound that haunted Alex's dreams. They turned toward the window, and there, just outside, they saw it, a shadow, tall and thin, moving slowly, deliberately. The scarecrow stood at the edge of the yard, its arms outstretched, its head tilted, just as it always was. But now it seemed to be moving, shifting slightly, as if straining against invisible bonds. The button eyes glinted in the moonlight, dark and unblinking, fixed on Alex. The rustling grew louder, a whisper that filled the night, wrapping around Alex like a blanket. They stood, moving to the window, their breath misting in the cool air. The scarecrow didn't move, but Alex could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating. They reached out, hands trembling, and pulled the curtains closed, shutting out the sight, but not the feeling. The rustling continued, a hiss that seeped through the walls, through the very fabric of the house. Alex backed away from the window, their heart a wild drumbeat in their chest. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows deepening, the air thick with an unseen menace. The scarecrow was closer now, too close, its presence a constant weight on Alex's mind. They couldn't escape it, couldn't run from it. It was in the field, in the house, in the walls. The house was no longer a refuge, but a trap, and Alex was caught, held fast by the presence that lurked just beyond sight, waiting. And the scarecrow, God, the scarecrow, it was always watching, always waiting, its dark eyes gleaming with a promise that Alex couldn't ignore. There was no escape, no safety. There was only the house, the field, and the scarecrow that moved, inch by inch, closer and closer. And the whispering, soft, insistent, never stopped. Alex couldn't take it anymore. The strange noises, the moving objects, the scarecrow creeping closer. It was all too much. Every nerve in their body was stretched to its breaking point, a tight wire humming with tension. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was anger, raw and burning, fueling them, pushing them to do something, anything. They couldn't just sit in the house, waiting for the next sound, the next sign that the scarecrow was coming. They had to face it, confront it, whatever it was. They waited until nightfall, when the sky turned a deep, inky black, and the moon hung low and swollen, casting an eerie silver light over the world. Alex stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the field, the flashlight clutched tight in their hand. The light felt solid, a lifeline in the dark, but it also felt fragile, a thin barrier against the unknown. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, each beat echoing in the stillness. The house seemed to hold its breath, the shadows pressed against the walls. Taking a deep breath, Alex turned, heading for the back door. The air outside was cold, biting, the kind of cold that sank into your bones and stayed there. They stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under their feet, the sound too loud in the silence. The field stretched out before them, the grass swaying gently in the breeze, the barn a dark shape against the sky. And there, standing near the well, was the scarecrow. It was closer than ever before, its form stark and solid in the moonlight. Alex's fingers tightened around the flashlight, their knuckles white. They took a step forward, then another, their feet crunching on the gravel, the sound echoing in the quiet. Each step felt heavy, as if the earth itself was trying to hold them back, to keep them from reaching the scarecrow. But Alex kept moving, driven by something deeper than fear, something that gnawed at their insides. The scarecrow loomed larger as Alex approached, its arms still outstretched, its head tilted to one side. The hat was pulled low over its face, but the eyes, those dark, glinting button eyes, were visible, staring out from the shadow. Alex stopped a few feet away, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the scarecrow's ragged form. The wind picked up, a low moan that seemed to come from the depths of the earth, rustling the scarecrow's clothes, making the straw inside shift and crackle. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, their breath coming in short, sharp gasps. They could feel the scarecrow's presence, a tangible thing that pressed against their skin, heavy and cold. It was as if the air around them was thickening, solidifying, trapping them. Alex raised the flashlight, the beam steady, unwavering. They took a step closer, their voice trembling. "What are you?" Alex demanded, their voice loud in the night. "What do you want?" The scarecrow didn't move, didn't react. It just stood there, silent, still, its eyes fixed on Alex. The wind howled, whipping at Alex's hair, tugging at their clothes. The air was thick with tension, a charged electricity that made Alex's skin prickle. They took another step forward, their heart thudding in their ears. "I'm not afraid of you," Alex said, their voice firmer now, the anger bubbling up, hot and fierce. "You hear me? I'm not afraid." But even as they said it, Alex knew it wasn't true. The fear was there, coiled tight in their gut, a cold knot that wouldn't go away. The scarecrow was wrong, all wrong, and Alex could feel it, deep down, a primal instinct that screamed at them to run, to get away. But they couldn't. They had to know. They had to understand. The flashlight flickered, the beam dimming for a moment before steadying. Alex's breath hitched, panic clawing at their chest. They took a step back, the fear surging up, overwhelming the anger. The scarecrow's head tilted, just a fraction, the movement so slight Alex almost missed it. But it was enough. The flashlight flickered again, the light sputtering, and in the darkness Alex saw it, the scarecrow's hand, twitching, the fingers curling. A scream tore from Alex's throat, raw and desperate, as they stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from their grasp, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The light rolled, casting wild shadows, and Alex turned, running, their feet pounding against the earth, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The scarecrow's rustling followed them, a whispering hiss that filled the night, chasing them, haunting them. Alex reached the house, slamming the door behind them, bolting it, their hands shaking. They leaned against the door, gasping for breath, their heart racing. The house was dark, the shadows deep, and Alex could feel the scarecrow's presence, pressing against the walls, filling the air. It was inside, somehow everywhere, its eyes watching, waiting. They backed away from the door, their eyes darting around the room, searching for something, anything. The flashlight was still outside, lying in the dirt, and Alex felt a surge of panic. The scarecrow was out there, in the dark, and Alex was trapped alone. They stumbled into the living room, their hands fumbling for the light switch. The overhead light flickered on, casting a harsh glow, and Alex let out a shaky breath, the light a small comfort. But the comfort was fleeting. Alex could still feel it, the scarecrow's presence, like a weight pressing down on them, suffocating. They moved to the window, their hand trembling as they pulled back the curtain, just enough to see. The field was dark, the scarecrow a shadowy shape, but Alex could see it, see the way it leaned, its arms reaching out, reaching for the house. The light above them flickered, the bulb buzzing, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. The air was thick, heavy, a pressure that pressed against their skin, making it hard to breathe. Alex turned away from the window, their eyes wide, their mind racing. The scarecrow was coming. It was moving. And there was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the shadows shifting, crawling, and Alex could feel the fear, the terror clawing at their throat, choking them. They sank to the floor, their back against the wall, their knees drawn up to their chest. The house creaked, the sound a low groan, and Alex closed their eyes, tears slipping down their cheeks. The scarecrow was coming. It was coming for them, and there was nothing they could do. No escape, no safety, only the darkness, the whispers, and the endless, silent watch of the scarecrow. Alex didn't leave the house for 2 days. They couldn't bring themselves to go outside, not with the scarecrow out there, waiting, always waiting. It was as if the whole world had shrunk, the boundaries of reality closing in, until only the house and the field remained. Alex drifted through the days like a ghost, moving from room to room, trying to keep busy, to keep the fear at bay. But it was always there, a shadow at the edge of their mind, whispering, reminding them of the scarecrow and its dark, silent vigil. The dreams were worse, more vivid, more real. Each night, Alex found themselves in the field, the sky above them dark and endless, the wind cold against their skin. The scarecrow was always there, looming, its button eyes gleaming, its straw fingers reaching. In the dreams, Alex would try to run, but their feet were heavy, stuck in the mud, and the scarecrow would come closer, its whispers filling the air, wrapping around Alex like a shroud. On the 3rd day, Alex stumbled upon the journal. They hadn't meant to find it, hadn't even known it was there. But the attic was a place Alex had always avoided, its dusty corners filled with the remnants of a past that didn't belong to them. They had been searching for something, maybe a distraction, maybe an answer, when they found it tucked away in an old trunk, hidden beneath a pile of yellowed newspapers and forgotten knickknacks. The journal was old, the leather cover cracked and worn, the pages brittle, yellowed with age. Alex opened it slowly, the smell of dust and time rising from the pages, filling the air. The handwriting was spidery, cramped, and Alex had to squint to read the words, the letters blurred and faded. But as they read, the words seemed to leap from the page, searing into Alex's mind, each line a cold, sharp knife. The journal told of a curse, an ancient curse that had been placed on the land long before the house was built, before the fields were plowed. It spoke of a dark ritual, a sacrifice made to appease something old, something hungry. The scarecrow, the journal said, was a vessel, a conduit for the curse, bound to the land by blood and straw. It was not just a thing of wood and cloth, but a living, breathing entity, tied to the earth, to the soil, to the very bones of the ground. Alex read on, their heart pounding, the words blurring together as they turned the pages. The curse needed a host, a living soul to anchor it, to give it form, to feed it. Without a host, The scarecrow was bound to the field, trapped, powerless. But with a host it could move. It could hunt. It could feed. The journal spoke of the previous owners of the house, of the strange disappearances, the madness that had taken hold of those who lived there. The curse had claimed them, one by one, feeding on their fear, their despair, their lives. Alex's hands shook as they turned the last page, the final entry scrawled in a hurried, desperate script. The scarecrow, the journal said, had to be destroyed, the curse broken. But it could not be burned, could not be cut down. The scarecrow was tied to the land, to the soil, to the earth. To destroy it, one had to destroy the land itself, to salt the earth, to burn the field, to uproot the very ground. But even then, the journal warned, the curse might not die. It might only sleep, waiting for the next fool to disturb it, to wake it, to bring it back. Alex closed the journal, their hands trembling, their mind racing. The scarecrow was a vessel for the curse, and it needed a host. It needed Alex. The realization hit them like a blow, a cold, hard truth that settled in their bones. The scarecrow had been moving closer, each night, each day, inching its way toward the house, toward Alex. It was waiting, watching, ready to claim its host, to feed on Alex's fear, to take their soul. The air in the attic was stifling, thick with dust, with the weight of the past, with the dark knowledge of the curse. Alex felt the walls closing in, the shadows deepening, the darkness pressing against their skin. They had to get out, had to move, had to do something, anything. They grabbed the journal, tucking it under their arm, and fled the attic, their footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. Downstairs, the house was quiet, the silence heavy, oppressive. Alex moved to the window, pulling back the curtain, peering out at the field. The scarecrow was there, as it always was, but now it seemed closer, its form clearer in the fading light. The wind blew, and the scarecrow's hat shifted, its head tilting, those dark eyes glinting. Alex's mind raced, the journal's words echoing in their ears. The scarecrow was coming for them, and there was no escape. The house was a trap, the field a prison, the scarecrow a predator. The curse was real, alive, and it wanted Alex. It needed Alex. They turned away from the window, their heart pounding, their breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The journal had spoken of a way to break the curse, to destroy the scarecrow, but it was dangerous, risky. Alex would have to burn the field, salt the earth, destroy the very land that held the curse. But even then, there was no guarantee. The curse might only sleep, waiting for the next victim, the next host. Alex's mind whirled, their thoughts a jumble of fear and desperation. They couldn't stay here, couldn't wait for the scarecrow to come. They had to act, had to do something. The curse had claimed others, fed on them, destroyed them. Alex wouldn't be next. They couldn't be next. The sun was setting, the shadows growing longer, the darkness creeping closer. Alex moved to the kitchen, their hands shaking, their heart racing. They grabbed a can of gasoline from under the sink, the cold metal heavy in their hand. They had to do it, had to burn the field, had to destroy the scarecrow. It was the only way, the only chance. As they moved to the door, the house groaned, the walls creaking, the air heavy with the weight of the curse. Alex hesitated, their hand on the doorknob, their heart pounding. The scarecrow was out there, waiting, watching. The field was a prison, the land a trap, the scarecrow a predator. Alex took a deep breath, steeling themselves, and opened the door. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp, the darkness a living thing. Alex stepped outside, the can of gasoline in one hand, the journal in the other. The field stretched out before them, the scarecrow a dark shape against the sky. The wind blew, the grass swaying, the air thick with the scent of earth and straw. Alex moved forward, their steps sure, their hearts steady. The scarecrow was coming, and they would be ready. The curse would end, the scarecrow would burn, and Alex would be free. Or so they hoped. The field seemed to stretch on forever. a vast expanse of darkness broken only by the silver light of the moon. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and something else, something rotten, like meat left out in the sun too long. Alex's skin prickled, the fine hairs on their arms standing on end. Each step felt heavier than the last, the ground beneath them soft, as if the earth itself was trying to pull them down, to swallow them whole. In one hand, Alex clutched the gasoline can, the other gripping the journal. The words from the attic still echoed in their mind, a litany of dread that pulsed with each beat of their heart. The scarecrow needed a host. It needed Alex, and if they didn't stop it now, it would never stop. It would keep coming, creeping closer and closer, until it took what it wanted. Ahead, the scarecrow stood near the well, its silhouette stark against the sky. The moonlight cast long shadows across its form, making it seem taller, more menacing. The hat was tilted, the burlap face half in shadow, but the eyes, those dark, glinting button eyes, were visible, staring out at Alex, unblinking. The wind rustled the scarecrow's clothes, the sound a dry whisper that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. Alex stopped a few feet away, the can of gasoline heavy in their hand, their breath coming in short, sharp gasps. They could feel the scarecrow's presence, a cold, suffocating pressure that wrapped around them, squeezing the air from their lungs. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, watching, waiting, ready to pounce. "This ends now," Alex whispered, their voice swallowed by the night. They unscrewed the cap from the gasoline can, the acrid smell filling the air. They glanced down at the journal, the words blurring in the dim light, but the meaning clear, sharp. Burn the field, salt the earth. Destroy the land, and the scarecrow would be powerless. Destroy the land, and the curse would end. Alex moved forward, their hands steady, their mind focused. They poured the gasoline in a wide circle around the scarecrow, the liquid soaking into the dry grass, the smell strong, pungent. The scarecrow didn't move, didn't react, but Alex could feel it watching, its eyes following their every move. The wind howled, and Alex could have sworn they heard a faint, whispering voice, a low murmur that sent a chill through their blood. "You can't stop it," the voice whispered. The words carried on the wind, hissing through the darkness. "You can't stop what's coming." Alex ignored the voice, the fear, the cold dread that clawed at their heart. They finished the circle, the gasoline glistening in the moonlight, a dark ring that surrounded the scarecrow. They stepped back, reaching into their pocket, their fingers closing around the lighter, cold and hard. The wind blew, the grass swaying, and Alex flicked the lighter, the flame small, fragile, but bright, a beacon in the dark. They hesitated, just for a moment, the fear surging up, a wave that crashed over them, threatening to drown them. The scarecrow stood still, silent, its eyes dark, deep, endless. Alex's hand trembled, the flame flickering, and then they threw it, the lighter arcing through the air, spinning, the flame trailing behind. For a moment, nothing happened. The lighter hit the ground, and the flame sputtered, weak, flickering. Then, with a whoosh, the gasoline ignited, the flames roaring to life, bright hot, a wall of fire that leapt up, reaching for the sky. The fire spread, the grass catching, burning, the air thick with smoke, the heat intense, searing. The flames circled the scarecrow, closing in, the firelight casting eerie shadows, making the scarecrow seem to move, to shift. Alex stumbled back, their eyes wide, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The flames roared, crackling, and Alex could hear a sound beneath the fire. A low, guttural moan, like the earth itself was crying out. The scarecrow stood in the center of the fire, its clothes catching, the straw smoldering, and then it moved. Its arms twitched, jerked, the movement stiff, unnatural. The head tilted, the button eyes gleaming, and the burlap mouth stretched wide, a scream ripping through the night, a sound that cut through Alex like a knife. "No," Alex screamed, their voice lost in the roar of the fire. They turned, running, their feet pounding the ground, the smoke burning their lungs, their eyes. The flames were behind them, chasing them, the heat at their back, the fire a living thing, hungry, devouring everything in its path. The field was ablaze, the grass turning to ash, the air thick with smoke, the world a blur of heat and light. Alex reached the house, stumbling up the steps, their hands fumbling with the door, their heart pounding. They slammed the door shut, bolting it, their back against the wood, their breath coming in ragged, panicked gasps. The house was dark, the shadows deep, the air still. But outside, the fire roared, the flames licking at the walls, the windows, the sky. They moved to the window, pulling back the curtain, their eyes wide, their mind racing. The field was a sea of fire, the flames high, wild, consuming everything. The scarecrow was gone, consumed by the blaze, the curse broken, the land destroyed. But as Alex stared into the flames, they saw it, a shape, a shadow, moving in the fire, dark, twisted. The scarecrow. It was still there, still moving, its form dark against the flames, its eyes glinting, its mouth open, a scream that echoed through the night, through Alex's mind. The fire raged, the heat intense, the smoke thick, and the scarecrow moved, its arms reaching, its body burning, but still it came, still it moved, still it watched. Alex backed away from the window, their heart pounding, their breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The fire was outside, but the fear was here, inside, deep in their bones, in their blood. The scarecrow was gone, the field was burning, but the curse was not dead. It was alive, awake, and it would never stop, never rest, never end. The house creaked, the walls groaning, the shadows shifting, and Alex knew deep down that the scarecrow was still there, still waiting. The fire burned, the night roared, and the scarecrow watched, its eyes dark, endless, its presence a weight, a shadow, a promise that Alex could not ignore. The scarecrow was not gone. The scarecrow would never be gone. And Alex knew, as the night stretched on, as the fire burned, that they would never be free, never be safe. The scarecrow had moved, and it would keep moving, closer and closer, until it took what it wanted, until it took them. The scarecrow had come for Alex, and it would not be denied.